You're listening to the Co-Creator Network. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Hi, you're listening to Our Voice Now Humanities team. I'm Sarah Applegate.
And I'm Angie Belle.
Tonight we're talking with Mary Schechter. Mary Schechter is the president of the Intuitive organization, which supports both organizations and individuals. She focuses on connecting the heart and the head. Mary provides heart-centered hypnotherapy and is a facilitator of heart math. She also is the co-host of the Leaders of Light radio show here on Co-Creator Radio Network. And thank you, Mary, so much for being on our show.
Hey, it's my pleasure, ladies.
So could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience with hypnotherapy?
Oh, I'd be happy to. Let's see, where do I start? I think the most important thing to focus on is that when you're working with human beings and when you're working with human behavior, as I do, as a practitioner, either working with those individuals or organizations, you always encounter resistance to change. And although the mind may say, I want to embrace a new way of being, or I want to change my behavior for the better, right? The emotions often will move contrary to that. And so in the process of people evolving, they often will hit stumbling blocks where they can't, even though their mind wants to, they cannot get past some of those emotional blockages, if you will, that come from places in their past, perhaps, that they're not even necessarily aware of. So as far as knowing me and what's important for folks to know about me, what I decided to do was to pursue hypnotherapy as a tool to use to help people disconnect from those things which interrupt them from being productive. And the best way for me to do it, I thought, was to utilize hypnotherapy and hypnosis as part of that to help people fast track to get them where they want to go.
That's great, and it's good to and you obviously we haven't explained exactly what it is, but it's something that's important, that a good way to move beyond these blockages, because people put up walls that they don't even realize they put up on their own.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Would you want me to describe the difference between hypnosis and hypnotherapy now?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I have my notes very close to me because I want to be as specific and clear in my language as I can, because it's very easy for people who are not familiar with hypnotherapy to get them confused. So what I think I'm going to do is to just read you a little bit from my own notation. First of all, hypnosis is a treatment intervention comprised of inducing the client into what we call a relaxed, suggestible state, and then offering what we also call post-hypnotic suggestions for relief of symptoms. Now, those symptoms can be presenting as a desire to stop smoking, or anxiety, or a specific phobia. But the idea here is that while people are in hypnotic trance, you can go in and introduce, when they're open, you can introduce those suggestions as a way for them to reframe it, reframe their perceptions, and when they come back out of hypnosis, hopefully be able to not be affected by those things. Now, in contrast, hypnotherapy is actually the process of psychotherapy with a client who is in the hypnotic altered state of consciousness. So what does that mean? What that means is when I'm working with an individual, we're actually conducting therapy while the person is under or within a hypnotic trance. So all of the work, when I say the work, all the change work, all of the what we call release work that may be done is done outside of the conscious awareness of that person. So that's where it gets really interesting, and that's also where and how people can become much more able to solve their problems.
Yeah, I think the way you described it, the way you described hypnosis kind of made me think of the movie Inception, And I don't know if you've seen that movie, but like basically what happens is they like go through dreams, like further and further into dreams in this in their client or whatever like mind, I guess, and then they like plant an idea as like the concept of it. So it's sort of like a similar thing, not as like action packed as the movie or anything, but I think it's kind of the same idea.
Yeah, what's really interesting about hypnosis once you start to study it is about 80% of every day we are, as human beings, moving in and out of what you would call a hypnotic trance. And what that means is that we move from what is called the conscious mind into the subconscious mind. And it happens all the time. But the difference is that the point that's, I think, important to make is that people just don't know what's happening. So we're often accessing information that's just below our conscious awareness. We're interacting with it, and then we're drawing upon that to help us be more engaged in our conscious activities. As far as I'm concerned, I thought that's fascinating. And here's another example. The television is a big attractor of people's attention and focus, and you can literally become hypnotized by TV. Think about it. Also driving. There's something called, driving hypnosis, where people can become fixated on the road and actually move into a light trance while they're driving.
My mom does that.
So, it's everywhere, right? It's everywhere.
Yeah. My mom, it takes her, when she's driving, it takes her like extra long to answer a question if she hasn't been like carrying on a conversation, because she kind of like, she described the process. She's like, well, I'm like up here. Then I have to be like, okay, she's talking to me. She asked me a question. Okay, that's the question. This is the answer. And she like, it's like, it takes longer because I'm not really in my body at that point.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So I think the thing that's important to talking about hypnosis and hypnotherapy, the important point here is that when you can bypass that conscious mind, bypassing what we call the observing ego, okay, that's the part of us that's always the critique in the background. So even as you're listening to my voice and you're running your show today, there's a part of you that's observing you. Right? And so what we need to do, and what we do through hypnotherapy, is to relax that, to move away from that, so you can access what we call additional material that has nothing to do necessarily with the here and now, but has a lot to do with people's past.
Yeah, it's great. And coming into doing this show, I guess I didn't really know what hypnotherapy or hypnosis was. And I think that a lot of people have no clue of what it is and how it helps and what's going on when you're under it. And it might scare people too, I think.
Did you just say it might scare people?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's interesting, because one of the things that we learned when I became involved, and you did ask that question, I didn't fully answer it. In 2010, I decided to become certified because I wanted to have an additional tool in my toolbox to use with clients. But in the more you learn about the mind itself, the more interesting it becomes, because you realize there are so many resources. Okay, resources that are within you that you never even knew existed to solve your problems. And one of the most, I think one of the most powerful elements and aspects of hypnotherapy, which has to do with being frightened, is that, and I want people to listen very carefully to this, is that when you are under an hypnotic trance, whether it's a light trance, a medium trance, etc., you will never do anything that you're not willing to do. Now, if you've seen hypnosis entertainers, hypnotists, if you will, make people cluck like chickens, you might argue that, right? But the truth is that at some level there is a willingness to do that, or else they wouldn't do it. And that's what I tell my clients. I say, never be afraid, because you always have the capacity to be in control. even though your conscious mind might be over here. And that's proven true and true and true again, time and time again.
Yeah, that's interesting. You're always in control, like, and that you honestly even that's kind of like revealing what you honestly would be willing to do. Like things you might not admit that you'd be willing to do. You would be even more comfortable, like the clucking like a chicken thing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And what you find is that here, I'll give you an example. When you're working with people, sometimes you will find that they hit a wall. Okay, and I'm going to say a wall as a figurative wall. So you take them into hypnotic trance, and you start going through the steps of hypnotherapy. And I've had a number of clients who, when we reach the apex, the moment at which they might be ready to open the door to reveal an insight about themselves, usually coming from a past experience. What has happened a couple of times, ladies, is they literally see nothing in their mind's eye because they're in this trance and they're talking to me. They cannot see past a black wall or a gray wall. And what that tells us is that the mind is not ready to release that material yet. So it's a fail-safe. In other words, I can't make them go somewhere that they don't want and aren't ready to go. Isn't that awesome?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that, and it's great for people to realize this because, like, even me, who I had a I knew that you couldn't be hypnotized into doing something that you were like morally against or something, but it's kind of reassuring that I couldn't like go say something that I didn't want to or like didn't want to admit or something like that. Like, it's not going to release all your secrets or anything. It's a safe zone.
It is a safe zone, and you can trust that. And of course, for heaven's sake, if someone were to pursue hypnotherapy, that's one of the first things that they really want to be aware of is the integrity of their facilitator. And what happens when you begin to work with clients, the very first step that I take people through is called an interview. And for about 20, 25, 30 minutes, I will sit and actually ask a series of questions that will help elicit exactly what that individual wants to work on in their session. And you learn a lot about the client, and the client learns a lot about you as well. And that's essential that they trust you. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that that's definitely really important in this type of situation where even though you do have control in the situation, you might not feel that you have control. So it's really important that you know and trust the person you're working with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You just briefly made mention of like going through into the process of hypnotherapy. Would you describe the process of it?
Yeah, sure. I can give an overview. We don't have to get into a lot of detail, but just to kind of give you the 50-cent tour. As I said, the first thing that happens is you sit down with your facilitator and your therapist, and you actually have an opportunity to share with them information of what brings you there. So I'm going to give you an example. Once I was working with a woman who couldn't sleep through the night. She just couldn't get through the night without waking up multiple times. Couldn't figure it out. Dealt with her physical body, tried to run and get herself tired, tried everything, and nothing worked. So in this initial interview, we were able to identify that is her presenting issue. Okay, so you get very clear about what the outcome is that you're looking for, because it's a little bit, think of a shotgun versus a sharpshooter, right? So if I have a shotgun and it's cut off, I'm going to have all that, all those bullets, all that ammunition, and it's going to go in a million different directions. If I have a gun which is highly calibrated and I have a scope on it, I can get high precision with better results. So that's what this interview really is all about, is identifying what's the outcome and what's the result that we want. And so the next thing is really cool that we get into. It's called an induction. And that's actually when the person begins to move into a trance state. And the trance state can happen in a number of different ways. I like to use what's called eye fixation, which means you focus the client's attention either on a spot, an object, or even as on your thumb as it would move slowly backwards and forwards. It's really the commonest and most common and easiest way of inducing people. And so that allows the focus to start to soften and to shift a little bit, and for them to be able to become more relaxed. Then I do what's called deepening, which is I take them a visualization, for example, as an elevator, and we go down successively, level by level by level, until I bring them down, all the way down to the bottom of this elevator using that visual, and they get to a place of even more relaxation. So that's the point at which, using this particular model, we use something called anchoring, and that's allowing this individual that you're working with to create and go to a favorite place within their imagination. And why is that important? Well, it's a safe place, and it elicits all sorts of good feelings in the body. So as you induce them and you deepen it, then you bring them into this favorite place and you anchor it, meaning you create a physical cue in the body. So let's say I'm anchoring you, Sarah, and you'll go to your favorite place, and I'll say, hold your thumb, hold the tip of your right thumb, and that's a physical cue, or what's called an anchor, to help you get back to that favorite place through association on a physical level. So the next section, which would be like section 3, is really where the body of all the work happens. And what does that mean? Well, it means that we're always walking around with lots of emotion. But as I said, most people really don't have a handle on what it is. So as using hypnotherapy, we focus in on a couple of key emotions, and we're looking for those. They're called core emotional feelings, and we're looking for the client to identify those. And we ask them to go back in time from present into what's called an age regression. And here's the really neat thing, is that they don't need to consciously elicit any of these memories. I will say to them, you don't have to control this. You will literally see it come up on your in your mind's eye. And then suddenly a client may be 5 years old and they're reliving, re-experiencing something that at a conscious level they could never remember. They re-experience that particular event, and then what we do is we assist them in being able to identify the emotional components of that event. We help them reduce the emotion while they're under hypnosis, and it's a calibration and moving it back and reducing the emotion. We anchor that state, and we may go through a couple of other regressions. I've actually had clients go into what they consider to be a past life as a way to solve some of their issues. And then we do what's called a formal extinguishing, meaning that we'll take a look at their level of fear, shame, loneliness, guilt, addiction, powerlessness, and we will help them address that particular emotion while they're under the hypnotic trance by what's called an emotional release. So I have my little teddy bear, and I might give that to you and say, I want you to consider that this is your mother. Or this is your grandfather, or whoever you need to speak to. And so then that emotional release will happen while the person's in their hypnotic trance. And we take them a little bit further and do some more what we call extinguishing. And then slowly, when we recognize that work is done, because they'll be exhausted, number one, and then they'll know it's time. They'll know it's time to finish it, because you can't do too much. And again, that subconscious mind knows exactly how much it can tolerate. and exactly how much it's willing to go through in any given session. And then what I love about this particular model is we actually use the energy centers of the body, and we use that as part of the healing completion, meaning that we will talk about heart-centered feeling, and we always go back to that model of unconditional love, and they can offer that to themselves and anchor that. And so by the time they come out of their hypnotic trance, they're not the same people. They aren't. So that's just the overview.
Yeah, it's really good to get the play-by-play, and it's actually kind of funny because when you were describing the first part with the elevator and then the holding onto the thumb and stuff, it like reminded me again of the movie Inception, because they have some of those kind of, like, they all had their own little
Token.
yeah, a token, so they knew like the weight of it, so they knew like where they were, and it has a lot of the same ideas. It's
Absolutely.
a good way
Yeah.
to kind of connect or kind of get an idea of what it is.
Absolutely. Good.
Yeah.
I've seen that movie. I haven't seen it yet, so you got me all intrigued.
You should definitely see it. My film class, we basically did a very in-depth, like, over looking into the movie, and it is very similar in a lot of ways to like the hypnosis, the elevator scenes, the tokens, the idea of just going lower and deeper into like the subconscious.
Right.
It's interesting.
And
Well,
I'm guessing they probably did research on hypnosis to get it. So,
Mhm.
well, here's a way to think of it. Here's a bottom line. That our ego, our observing ego, the part of us that's always monitoring, managing, and only concerned with personal survival, the gatekeeper, right? The traffic cop. That ego part of us is interested in minimizing pain and continuing your survival. And if it feels threatened at any level from any source, it will set up barriers to stop you from experiencing certain things. So that's why hypnosis is so powerful, is that we soften that ego, we set it aside, we say, hey, brother, take a coffee break. And then we allow the rest of this internal resource, which is you, to be able to go back and unencumbered, address and resolve situations that have bugged you forever, and you didn't quite know why. So just to give you the flip side, the woman who came to me who couldn't sleep went through 2 sessions, and by the end of the second session, she felt pretty good. She called me a couple weeks later and she says, "You're not going to believe this." She goes, "I have slept through the night every single night since we finished." And so that's a testimony to how powerful this process can be in dealing with phobias and things that you just can't get a handle on with a conscious mind.
yeah, I think that's awesome, and it seems like a really good technique and stuff. And I mean, we were talking about how the Inception kind of had the similar ideas and stuff, and I think it is becoming more widespread. But do you feel like it should be more, like people should use it more and it can be more useful than it is right now?
I think the first thing to take into account is the fact that human beings have a baseline of fear, right? Most human beings there's only 2 emotions, right? There's only 2 places to go, love and fear. And the vast majority of human beings on the earth are driven by fear. And that comes up in different ways. To allow yourself to be open and vulnerable and be led by another human being requires you to do one thing. It requires you to take risks. And until or unless more people are willing to kind of dispel the myths around hypnosis, the clucking chicken myths and those kinds of things, I think that it's going to be a tough sell. But here's the interesting part, is that hypnotherapists, as are some other what might be considered alternative therapies, non-traditional therapies, are being used more and more all the time. And I have a friend who is also a hypnotherapist who has she's booked out 3 months, 4 months because the word spreads just how powerful this is as a method. I'd love to see more people use it, and I think that over time, as we continue to evolve as a species, people will eventually probably be more open to it.
Yeah, it's great. And I do think that these, like you said, the new ideas are becoming more and more known and more and practiced more and more.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Well,
it's definitely coming into the light how powerful like hypothecary, hypnotherapy, all these different things that are not considered like pharmaceutical kind of medicine or like going to see a psychologist. These are like the people are realizing these are more powerful and they are and on some level probably better for you because
Mm-hmm.
they're more down to earth and more based on more traditional, like way back kind of treatments for different things.
Well, I would agree with you, and I would say that one of the greatest gifts that, for example, hypnotherapy offers is the idea that here's the approach we take. You, as the client, have all the answers you need. There's nothing wrong with you. You may have been interrupted in your ability to, in your upbringing, in your ability, you may have maladapted. That's a better way to describe it. But that we look at each and every client as the person who's the authority. And as a therapist, our job is just to guide you back to yourself. And when you think about the fact that you've got all the answers that you need for any question that ever comes up, right? Doesn't that feel good?
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
There's
Yeah.
exactly. It empowers you. It empowers you. And that's one of the reasons why hypnotherapy is such a great tool to use, because it's not a model that implies that you have a problem or that there's something wrong within you that has to be fixed. You've got all the resources you need, and you just need a helping hand to go in, to recalibrate what's going on in there, and to help you pull some tools out, and to keep moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. And we're about out of time, but is there anything little that you'd like to say or reassure or explain quickly to our audience about hypnotherapy?
Well, it would be even broader than hypnotherapy. Here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say that we all have the right as human beings to live a life which is fulfilling. We don't have to be driven by our fears, right? And so that means that if you use a tool such as hypnotherapy to be able to help you become happier, healthier, less anxiety, without phobia, then do it. And remember that there's only one thing you need to do to get the ball rolling, and that is to make a decision to pick up the phone and call a practitioner and quiz them and make sure they're the kind of people that you want to work with, and get yourself signed up. That's what I would say.
That's great. Thank you so much for being our guest, Mary.
It's my pleasure, ladies. It's a wonderful program, and thanks for having me.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And thanks
Thank you for
everybody
being
for
on.
yeah. And thanks everybody for listening. And remember that you can listen to our archives on the show. Thanks everybody for listening, and goodbye. See you next